to begin with, can you tell me just a little bit about growing up and where you grew up and kind of your life before the Marines in Vietnam?
Okay. Born in 1949 and in Duluth. I grew up, lived on Raleigh Street for a while, then my dad bought a place outside of Proctor where I eventually went to school. Kind of a typical kid, riding a bike, fishing, and chasing girls eventually when I became a teenager. And my dad was an Army Ranger in World War II. He was also one of the first Green Berets, so he had a distinction of being Special Forces. And so I got to hear that a lot about if there was ever any whining or anything like that. Well, if you were a Ranger, you'd have to do this or that. But so maybe I had a resentment. I've had enough of that. Or he'd say, "Well," I'd tell my mother, I can't drink grapefruit juice, it gives me heartburn. And then he'd say, "Oh, if you were in Rangers, you'd have to drink a gallon of that and do this." But anyhow, but it was pretty normal. Blue collar. Went to Proctor and graduated in 1967.
And so why did you choose the Marines?
Well, I had several friends that I ran around with that were from Morgan Park, West Duluth, and Proctor, of course, and several of the guys were a year or so older than me. And one of my best friends, Walt Stafford, we used to run around double date together and everything, and he graduated a year before I did. And he went off in the Marines, and I heard all these stories, and he was off in Vietnam by the time I graduated high school. So by then I was dating my wife, my to-be wife, and I was flipping hamburgers at Henry's Hamburgers, and I thought there's got to be some more to life than this. And so I saw the Marine Corps drill team on television. They had their dress whites on. And I thought, boy, that's really sharp. I love their uniform. So I got up and went down to the Marine Corps recruiting office and joined for 2 years.
Can you tell us what training was like? I mean, you grew up in Proctor and Duluth, and I mean, had to be a world away, kind of going into the Marines and going through the training and all of that. What was that like?
The training itself wasn't all that difficult. I was a boxer. I played judo for several years and wrestled and did a lot of individual cross-country sports and that type of thing. So I was in really great shape. The mental process was scary. It was a lot different than today. It was pretty brutal. If you didn't get things right the first time, you might get punched in the chest or knocked down or whatever. So it was really kind of a shock there. But that's for only 14 weeks, and then once you become a Marine, then sometimes it gets even worse.
So when you went to Vietnam, what was your first experience in country like? What was your job? What did you do there?
Well, coming out of boot camp, you receive your MOS, which is your military occupation specialty, and mine was a machine gunner. And I remember calling my dad on the phone and saying, "Dad, I just got my MOS, and I'm a machine gunner." And he says, "Well, why are you so happy about that?" And I says, "Well, you don't have to walk point. You're always like 7 or 8 guys back in the line. So because so many point men got shot right off the bat. So." But he kind of grumbled something like I didn't know what I was talking about, which I didn't. And so then went through, after boot camp, went through what they call infantry training, several weeks of infantry training, and then machine gun school, and then staging, getting ready to go to Vietnam, and then off to Vietnam. And I remember we flew in on Braniff Airlines, and all the Marines said that was really the best flight because they had the prettiest stewardesses and everything. So it was all commercial airlines. And we got off in Da Nang. And we got off the plane, and everybody was looking around trying to figure if they'd be dodging bullets. And it was just like really quiet for an airport. and they took us about 2 or 3 blocks away in a kind of an underground Quonset hut type of thing that was sandbagged up, and I can remember the smells. It was just terrible. It was like rotten fecal matter and things like that. It was steaming hot. It was probably 110 or 112 degrees, and we had stateside what they call utilities, and not the jungle utilities that would dry in the air. These were real heavy, thick stuff, and everybody was sweating, and we could look out the window and we could see the planes loading, and they just kept us there for a couple hours, and I watched our plane that we just got off with, that they were loading the caskets coming back, and it seemed like about as many people that got off that plane were hauling coffins back to the United States. So it was a real eye opener. And then they lined everybody up, and they said, count off 1, 2, 1, 2, and we did that, and all the ones got in one group, and the twos were in another group, and I knew what they were doing. There was either 1st Marine Division or 3rd Marine Division. 3rd Marine Division was just really getting beat up in Quezon, the Rock Pile, Camp Carroll, and those places, and 1st Marine Division was around from Way City on down, and I kept saying, and the big siege was on by then, and I kept saying, I don't want to get in the 3rd Marines, no more 3rd Marines. So I ended up, they said, all you number 1s are in 1st Marine, number 2 are 3rd Marine, and then they split you up real quick so you don't try to sneak back and forth. Little did I know that by the time I got to my outfit, the 3rd Marines had secured it to some degree, and the 1st Marines were getting the kind of the aftermath of the Tet Offensive of '68. And so that was my first day in Vietnam.
Wow. So then, what would a typical day be like for you in Vietnam? Was there a typical day?
Well, there's two parts to my tour. The first one was I got with a machine gun team that was securing a highway, and it was really pretty much a perimeter, and you checked identification cards and you provided security. Well, I was only there about 3 weeks, and then my outfit, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, was activated as a battalion landing team. And they took us all out of Vietnam, put us on ships back to the Philippine Islands. We refitted and regrouped and add people to our roster. And then our job was to go into all the places that where people were being hit real hard. So our job was to bail people out, either by helicopter, by Amtrak, or whatever. And so I guess that would be my typical day, was out in the bush. We didn't have a rear area. Most Vietnam vets will say, well, I was in camp this or camp that or fort this or fort that. And we were always out in the bush. Normally, about every month or so, that we would come back on board a ship, throw our clothes away, and take a shower, maybe the first one in 6 weeks or a month, and get refitted and new ammo and cleaned up. And most of the guys would be full of jungle rot and sores and who knows what, worms and everything from drinking the water. And so the average day would be getting up about 4:30 in the morning, unwrapping yourself out of a poncho liner, which is a big tarp to keep the mosquitoes off you, and never took my boots off. You see a lot of times in pictures that guys are sitting around with their boots off. You don't want to be out in the bush and get hit and not have your boots on. And so you were pretty much dressed the way you were for the day, maybe washed your face if you had any water, and you'd hear them holler, "Saddle up." And we'd get in line. We could be a company or the whole battalion would be out with about 800 or 900 Marines. And that's pretty much it. And we'd walk and go to wherever we were supposed to go, and then line up. And about every third or fourth day, we'd run into an ambush of some kind or run into the enemy. And that's when being back in the line as a machine gunner, most of the time, for some reason, the enemy didn't figure out that if they waited for half of your people to go through the ambush, they could split you in half and do some damage. Normally, they shot the first 2 or 3 Marines that were there, and so then machine gunners don't do anything until they're told to. So when the firing starts, you drop. You start snapping on extra ammo. My gunner would carry maybe 100 rounds attached to the machine gun. I would carry 700 rounds, and that's 49 pounds of ammunition. And we would snap on a couple extra 100 rounds. We would take cover and we would lay there. And I remember the first couple of times they said, "Well, what do we do?" And the gunners would say, "We don't do anything until they say guns up." And maybe a third of the time they never called for guns up. It would be an ambush of, maybe 1 or 2 people injured or something like that, and they didn't need an assault. So we'd sit there till they called guns up, and then we had probably 6 gun teams of 4 guys. So we'd have 24 guys ready to fan out and open up with automatic fire. So
what was that like? Do you remember? Just, I can't imagine you can forget, but what would that be like when they did say guns up? And I can only imagine the noise and the...
Yeah, normally you'd be in an open area. They'd probably try to get you where you weren't too concealed in the jungle or something. We fought in the jungle. We fought in the almost like a desert. One area was called Ganoi Island. That was a desert for 20 miles in each direction. And so depending on where you were, and they called guns up, you'd have your platoon leader. He'd say, you over here, you over here, and you'd set up a line and then start firing. And a lot of times the machine gunner would be down on the ground with the bipods. He'd be firing. As an ammo or assistant gunner, I would normally be on one knee looking down his shoulder, watching where the tracers went, tell him up or down or whatever, and left, right, and we'd fire until they told us to quit firing. But my gunner was kind of a crazy hillbilly, and he wasn't married, but I had got married by that time. And he'd kind of kneel up and he'd grab me by the back of the head and try to push me down. And I said, "Leave me alone." And he'd say, "You're married, get your head down." So we always have a running commentary of who should be watching what. And and that would happen, like I say, just like every third or fourth day. And then sometimes on big operations, you may be in a firefight that would last off and on for 2 days. You would just do that type of thing.
So if that was a typical day, do you have a worse day?
Yeah, there was a couple worse days. Probably before I go to that, but I'll have to say my luckiest day.
Your luckiest.
My luckiest day was on about the 13th. It was on the 13th of September, Friday the 13th, 1968. We were coming around a bend, and the road led up to a hill, kind of like looking at Wizard of Oz. And there was a hump on the hill, and my platoon sergeant was a real ex-drill instructor, real savvy. He says, "There's an ambush up there." So he says, "We're going to set." He called us down. He says, "Put 2 machine guns on the other side of this road, put 2 guns on this side of the road." And it was a little ditch. It was just a path, really. And so I was carrying the machine gun that day, and I set the machine gun up. And my former gunner, the hillbilly, he was off to my left. And I'm on the right-hand side of the machine gun, which is not fired from that side because I can't see out of my left eye all that well. So I was on the right-hand side of the machine gun with my left arm over the barrel of the gun, and as they started sweeping up the hill. And the first round that was fired was by their sniper, and it went through my shirt and under my armpit. And then the second shot, as he tried to finish the job, hit in front of me. I remember getting splattered in the face with gravel and stuff like that. But so that was my luckiest day. Had I been right-handed and been on the other side of the gun, it would have been a perfect shot. And but I guess my worst day would be the 19th of September. We were, it was the Operation Mead River, which lasted a long time. And we were, I have a couple pictures I can give you too of when we were approaching. We had a Stars and Stripes photographer with us that day for some odd reason. And my company was the Point Company, and my machine gun team was the Point Machine Gun Team. And we came up on through kind of a paddy and then a little bit of a field, and then there was a railroad berm, an old abandoned railroad berm that just if you saw it now would be maybe 20 feet higher than the surrounding area. There was no tracks, and we came behind there. We stayed low behind there, and they sent out a listening post, and the listening post got out about maybe 50 yards out in the field beyond that, and they were all shot dead. And then they called guns up, and they called all the rest of the company online, and we swept up over the hill, and there was a couple of battalions of North Vietnamese over there firing at us, and so we had a lot of took a lot of casualties on the way in, and I wasn't with my hillbilly buddy. He was with a different gun team at the time, and through the smoke and everything, I can't remember how everybody got. My gun team, the guys on my gun team were killed, and so I was the team leader at the time, and so there I am without a gun team and that. So my friend Huggins, the hillbilly, he comes back, and he's got his clothes kind of burnt off from white phosphorus from an air spotter, and he's in tatters. He looks like a hobo. And we grabbed up a machine. He grabbed a gun. I grabbed a bunch of ammo off the dead, and we went out on the very far right-hand side, and we fought our way up. And as a matter of fact, we were fighting out of the holes that they had dug. We were right on their line, firing down. And so I don't know how long we were out there for hours till we had only like 40 rounds left. And by that time we had taken, I think we had like 15 killed and 45 guys wounded laying out there. So they started hollering for us to start pulling back. We had some fresh troops coming in, and it was my squad leader was a guy named Ray Brooks, and Huggins and myself, and I'm on the left, and so Huggins says, well, when I start firing, Brooks, you get up and you take off. I'll keep them down. And we were only like 2 machine guns left, so they knew where we were. Fortunately, when they dug their hole out, there was a big pile of dirt in front that we were behind. And so he starts firing, and Brooks takes off, and man, he could have set an Olympic record getting back to the rear. And so we're down to maybe like 30 rounds or 20 rounds in the machine gun. And I had fired off pretty much all of my ammo out of my M16. And he says, okay, Bobby, he says, when I start firing, he says, you go. And so he gets up on one knee and starts shooting. And I get up about this far, and the gun jams. All of a sudden, it's just quiet. And I fall face down to get back down there, and I feel something ripping through my back. And I thought, son of a gun. It was warm, running down my back and everything, but it didn't hurt. But then I kind of flashed through my mind, well, you don't always feel it either, you know. So then I reached up and it looked like that, and it's all full of mud and sand, and it was my peaches that I had in my backpack. and I had stitched my whole backpack while I was laying down across, and I said, I think you better get that thing shooting, because I'm going to get out of here, you know. So he started again, and I got back about halfway when they fired a rocket or something like that, and it kind of picked me up and knocked me down, and kind of broke my leg and stuff like that, you know. So they come out and they dragged me over this hump, and they had all the wounded over there to medevac. And I remember a guy from Minneapolis said, he says, let me help you out. He gave me a canteen full of water, and he took my helmet and my backpack off, and he held my backpack up, and it was just ripped up. And I had a little tape from when my daughter was just an infant, the first tape of her going goo goo and cuckoo, and it hit that, and it was all tape sticking out and everything, you know. So anyhow, by the end of the day, I got medevaced out on one of the last choppers because I wasn't bleeding, my leg was just broken, and I went out with the dead. And as we took altitude, it cools off really fast. You go from 110 to about 50 degrees, and my teeth were chattering. I was laying there, and my gunner that was killed right off the bat, they had a poncho over him, and as we got up, it got windy, and the poncho blew off, and he was kind of looking at me. His eyes were looking at me, you know, and I reached down and covered it up, and covered him up, and laid back down, and then it happened again, and I figured, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. I just kind of lumped it out. It takes maybe 15 minutes to get back to the hospital, you know. So, but anyhow, that day we had actually 17 killed. We had a couple of people attached from another thing, and 45 of us were wounded, and there was another 45 that were medevaced for heat exhaustion, other types of things, you know. So that was the worst.
And you were wounded twice.
Yes, that was my first wound, so I was in the hospital. For that wound, they cut all my clothes off me, and bandaged me up and everything like that, and patched me up, and I remember the priest came in and got some information, and little did I know what happened is I had gotten married in the process, so they did. My wife was in Orange County, California, living with her sister while I was overseas, and so the Marine Corps sent 2 officers out to my parents' house, and my mother answers the door, and they said, "We're looking for Judith Gaskill, next of kin." And my mother says, "Well, she's with her sister. What, you know, was he hurt? Was he wounded? What?" He says, "I can't say until we notify the next of kin." So my mother spends like the first 20 hours or so they get hold of Judy to find out I was just wounded, you know. So, but the next time I was wounded was only, you know, not too far from that same area. We had another operation later, several months later, and I was wounded by a grenade fragment, and I remember they brought me in the hospital, and they kind of did the same thing, and the father comes out and "Well, I'd like to get some information." I says, no information at all. I said, "I'm not going to tell you who anything is. Last time my parents just about had heart attacks, you know." So, but so then, because of that, if you have 2 48-hour Purple Hearts, which means that you're in the hospital for 48 hours for any one of them, they would take you out of the combat zone. So I hung around until I got out of the hospital, and then they weren't going to make it too easy on Marines, so they sent me back to Okinawa, and I became a military policeman, and then went, and for my last duty station I went to the Philippines. I was still on no duty. My leg was still really bad. I was out in the bush, even kind of hobbling around, and about a year after I got out of the Marines, I still had to force a boot on my foot. You know, if I was my right ankle was real bad. It never really got much better, but so.
So, what was it like when you came home?
Well, first of all, we didn't get a lot of the news in Vietnam about all the protesters, and people say, well, they spit on me. Did anybody spit at you when you came home? Well, they flew us into San Francisco about 3 o'clock in the morning, which I think they did intentionally so that most of the protesters would be home in bed. But I said, well, you didn't see me in jail, so nobody spit on me. So, but it was really a non-entity. You know, I got out. They said, well, you have 2 weeks vacation coming, and then you're going to go to Quantico, Virginia, and get processed out of the Marines because they didn't need crippled up old machine gunners for the last 3 months you're in the Corps. So, do you want to go home now, or do you want to go to Quantico and get out? I said, no, I want to go home now, like right now. So, I did fly back, went to Duluth, and then they sent me to Quantico after I spent the 2 weeks with my family, and my daughter had never seen me. She was like a year old, you know. She took to me really great, you know. She was pretty good, and so then I spent some time in Quantico, and then I got out and came back to Duluth. And I remember coming in, I had my belly full of flying in airplanes because we had been shot up so many times in airplanes. I remember coming over on the bus, coming down the Duluth skyline. I saw Duluth all lit up and everything, and I thought, wow, this is really pretty. And so I was happy, and my wife's whole family, most of them worked at Elliott's meatpacking company, so I hung around the house for 3 or 4 days, and then my wife told me, oh, I got you a job. I said, what? She said, I found a job for you. My dad says to go down to Elliott's and fill the paperwork out, you'll start. So I had a job about 4 or 5 days later, and it was just like people I ran into, and Vietnam didn't even exist. You know, by that time, even a year or so later, when I decided to go back to college, all of the guys I graduated with, or all the people I graduated with, they were, maybe I saw one guy, he was working on his master's up there on something, you know, but all the rest of the guys, it was, you know, hey, where you been, Bob? Haven't seen you. I said, I was in Vietnam. Oh, okay. You know, so it was, and
that must have been kind of surreal. I mean, you have been through all of these hellish experiences. I'm still kind of processing the throw your clothes away. And I mean, just every day going through that, let alone being shot at, shot up, and injured, and watching the people that you care about, your buddies, getting killed and injured, and all of it, and then coming home, and it's like, oh, where you been?
One thing I did bring back, though, I remember my grandmother. I gave her a big kiss when I come back, and we had a little get together, and she got jungle rot from kissing me. I had spots on my face of jungle rot, and I remember my poor old grandma with this big jungle rot on her mouth. So I had some salve that they gave me from the Marine Corps. So the gift that keeps on giving, and that. But yeah, it was. And then there was no resources at all. My dad did tell me from World War II, he says, go down to the VA and make sure you make a claim, and everything that happened, all your bumps and bruises and everything like that. So I did do that, but as far as any organizations, I applied for jobs, and as I went along over the next year or so, I didn't want to work in a slaughterhouse. You know, I made pretty decent money, but I didn't think that this was going to be my career. But places I went, you know, you put down you were a veteran, you might as well said, you know, you run with Charlie Manson as far as they're concerned. And I remember I took the test for the post office, pretty good job too. And they needed mail sorters and stuff like that. And I scored like 96 or something like that, or 94. And I got 10 points veterans preference, so I had over 100%. So they called me down, and the guy interviewed me, the guy that ran the main post office in Duluth, and he says, well, here's this and this and that. We talked for 15, 20 minutes. He says, and I'll give you a call on Monday and let you know when to report in. Well, he calls me back Monday and he says, well, we processed your paperwork through Milwaukee, I think was the main post office. And he says, we can't accept you. And I said, why? He says, well, they don't say why. And I was just dumbfounded. I never did find out why they didn't do that, And so that happened to a lot of veterans, that you were kind of, and then from that point on, when I applied for jobs for the next few years, I wouldn't even put down I was a veteran. You see veterans walking around with their veterans hat on and everything like that. Back then, you were just like, I don't know if you go on TV, but like a turd in a punch bowl, So that's the welcome back I got.
Is there anything else that you want to say that you feel is important for people to understand? For those who never lived it, but who have loved ones or, who, and I suppose but I mean, is there just something that people just don't get about Vietnam or Vietnam veterans that you would like to talk about?
I think they've come a long way. The world, as far as the warrior versus the war type of thing, and I think the people that did all the protesting and the far left and the professors and the anti-war and everything that kind of turned that, they were on the verge of actually winning the war over there when they walked away. Not that that made any difference, but I still think that they can wave all the flags they want now. The guys that I knew that dodged the draft, the guys that went to college as long as they could, and that certainly weren't college material, they can all still jump in a lake as far as I'm concerned. It's not a resentment, but I guess I'm not. I just don't think you can all of a sudden say, well, this is a better war over here, and I'll support this one. But I think the warriors actually really took it in the shorts, because all the politicians, they went on and they made their millions, and all the wealthy and the Monsantos, they all made their money. And I guess, but in dealing with at least combat veterans, there's a lot of veterans that you'll talk to that weren't necessarily combat veterans, but probably the one thing that I've heard in the last 50 years since I was back that really emphasizes the whole thing that I experienced is, I heard it mentioned one time, and I've said it several times, is you never get your soul back.
You never get your soul back.
Nope. Innocence lost.
Thank you so much, and
You're
thank you
welcome.
for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.